So today we thought, I'd interview my own business partner, Triccia Ramos, and, ask her some questions about what it took her to go from the journey of being a corporate employee for 20 years and to becoming an entrepreneur. I started my journey many years earlier, but it would be good to hear from Triccia, who has been in it now for 2+ years. She and I met by way of background a couple of years ago at a mastermind and decided that this was something that we could do together. So do you want to talk a little bit about your background, Triccia, and for those of the listeners that don't know you as well as I do?
Well, I came from retail, years and years of retail. Why is that? I happen to live right by the Woodbury Commons, which if you're in New York or the Northeast, or maybe you're a Japanese tourist, you know all about the Woodbury Commons. It's probably like the most popular outlet center in the United States. It's in New York, and it's about 60 miles north of, or 50 miles north of New York City. So where I grew up, actually the high school I went to was just directly across the street. So jobs, growing up was all about like getting a job there. And so all through college, I would come home in between, breaks and semesters, and I would work there. And it was really fun. It was fun to have a job in retail in the mid-90s. It really was. And retail was just one of those things that, being around people and selling, I was good at, and I love helping people find things that made them really happy, whether it was like a piece of clothing or like something for their home. There was something about it that was really satisfying to me. And I love to sell, and I sell all kinds of things, whether it's an object or an idea. I just always really love to help people explore possibilities, and I think that's retail allowed me to do that.
Well, I'd say it's beyond retail as far as my experience goes with you. She's a great coach, by the way, and so I've seen her help transform other people's lives because we're coaches and we have clients and we help a lot of different people. So I know that you help them figure out what they might have walked into the store with and they had no clue what they're looking for, but you're able to ask them the questions that help them, oh, that's what I'm looking for. So you are such an enabler. I know that. So that's amazing. But that was
enabler
in that way that you just help them figure out, well, maybe that's not what I meant. What's the better word than enabler for you?
I guess someone who helps people see the possibilities. And, I like to think of myself, and I like to think of anyone really who genuinely enjoys the idea of sales and salesmanship. I like to think of that as a skill that helps people discover a better way of living and experiencing and being.
Okay. Well, then we'll scratch enabler in that conversation. But certainly you're helping them with their own perhaps desires and shine the little light on the blind spots for them, so they recognize what they are and who they are and what they really were desiring in that moment.
As a coach.
As a coach.
Right. Like whether it's a product or. Yes. It's you seeing yourself for who you truly are. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've sold people on themselves for sure.
Exactly. All right. Well, just careful when you run into Triccia then. So I want to go back to our own respective transitions from corporate to entrepreneurship, but today's focus is on you. So was there when you started your career, what brought you into that career? And why did you choose it? And was it your choice? And, people have different reasons why they got into their careers. So what is the genesis of your joining that global retail organization?
Yeah, well, I used to work with Crate and Barrel. I was with Crate and Barrel for over 20 years. And it was the late 90s and right before, right before 2000, actually. And for me, it truly was a matter of falling into it. I was a great salesperson. They brought in, I remember they brought in like a $1,400 coffee machine, and everybody was like, who's going to buy a coffee machine for $1,400? And I was like, I'm going to sell it. And I did, and there was something about like falling into things that made it easy. And I was young, I was like a year or two out of college, and I wanted to have a good time. I mean, I'm telling you, like my 20-something-year-old self.
But wait, isn't there also, I know that story a little bit about the fact that you were a pre-medical student and then you decided to not do that?
Yeah, I had every year in college, I had like 28 credits because I was pre-med. And then one day, during an internship at Beth Israel, I realized I don't want to be in the hospital.
For those listening to that, take note of that.
And I didn't want to be around. I didn't actually have the stomach to be in the hospital and to witness people, in conditions. I just didn't, now in hindsight, I could tell you there's a very good reason why I couldn't be in this space, because as I got older and I got on this coaching journey, I realized like I actually am very, very sensitive. I'm very, very open, and I feel pain. Like I feel other people's pain in a way that probably the average person wouldn't. Not only do I feel it, but I absorb it as if it was as if it's my own. And so I remember that internship I went to Beth Israel, and I was I can't remember if it was a junior at Fordham University in the Bronx. And gosh, I ran out of there and I never went back. And I called my mom, and I was just like, oh my God, I can't do it. It really, like being in there, felt like it was swallowing me.
In other words, you were taking on the pain of the patients that you might have gone to.
Yeah, and there was no way I was going to be able to help them because I was actually wearing and owning their pain.
That's interesting.
And if you're listening to this now, in the late 90s, we didn't have a term for that. We didn't know what that was. Today, we know that to be as someone who is an empath, or has empath abilities. And I just really finally came to that realization just last year. But my whole life, I
meaning for 20 years of working, you didn't know that. And
I didn't know that, but now knowing what I know as a leader, because I was always a leader in the organization.
Sure.
I was fortunate enough in that leaders recognized me and gave me opportunities. And so I was a people leader pretty much for my entire career in retail. And I want to say that in one hand, while it debilitated me in the hospital setting, it really was a superpower for me in my job in the retail industry leading people, because it allowed me a way to connect and relate with anybody, no matter who they were.
Not just your coworkers, and colleagues, but also people that came to the stores, the customers, right?
Yeah.
You were lit up when you were talking to the customers, I suppose.
Well, yeah, because I was able to immediately, what is the definition of empathy? It's being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes.
Yeah, exactly.
When you're an empath, not only are you in their shoes, you literally can feel in the very fabric of their being, like their pains, their problems that they want to solve, like who they are, what they're going through. And, about a year ago this time, I discovered that what's an empath? And I think I'm one, because I used to just think like maybe I'm just really ultra sensitive. And, being in the corporate setting, in the corporate environment, you're not necessarily exploring those types of things or what that is. That's kind of like more of a new term in the last like 10, 15 years. I had a boss actually in the last year that I was at Crate and Barrel say to me, "I think you're an empath." And I was like, "I don't know what that means, but you're probably right." Because she was saying that to me in response to how I was able to articulate what the struggles were that my teams were going through in the stores. And, I had multiple stores that were under my jurisdiction. And so she was like, "I think you're an empath." And I was like, "I don't know what that means, but you're probably right." Because, I've always my whole life been able to connect very deeply if I allowed myself with somebody's pain or what somebody might be going through or their joy.
Yeah.
I'm easily affected, if that's the word, affected by the energy around me.
Wow. So talk a little bit about how you fell into the Crate and Barrels, as you already mentioned it. As you said, you fell into it. How did that come about? How do you fall into it?
Well, I fell into it because I was looking for a job, and it was a temporary job because I had every intention to go to grad school.
Right.
But in the meantime, let me get a job for a year so that I can, have money to start paying student loans with. And I applied for a bunch of jobs in New York City. And they were all in fashion because all of my experience through college, I worked for Tommy Hilfiger, I worked for Ralph Lauren, I worked for Giorgio Armani. So I was looking for jobs in fashion. I applied for Bloomingdale's. If you're in New York City, these are institutions.
Institutions, exactly.
But my mother worked at a company that was what is the Bloomberg building now on 59th and Park. And so in my dorm, I used to go to Fordham University. My senior year, I lived at the dorms in Lincoln Center. So I literally would walk along Central Park South to visit my mom. And I would pass by this store called Crate and Barrel. They had beautiful, colorful mugs, really nice housewares items that I thought, when I get an apartment, I want some colorful dishes like that and like fun like glassware like that. And so that's why they were on my radar, and they were looking for a management trainee, and I thought I could apply for a management trainee job. And honestly, I applied for a bunch of jobs. Bloomingdale's was one of them, a bunch of other retailers, and Crate and Barrel was at the bottom of the list. But as a good empath, I go to the interview, and I'm interviewed by this gentleman called Kent Sargent. And it was the most amazing conversation.
He might be listening to you right now.
Yeah. And it was the most amazing conversation that he invited me to come back the next day to meet with the manager of the Madison and 59th Avenue store at the time. Her name's Lisa Smith, and she ended up being my boss and my mentor for many years. And he was like, "Can you come back tomorrow?" And I was like, "Absolutely." And at that point, no other job mattered, and I fell into it in the way that people can be magnetic, and why do we fall into things like we fall in love with people, don't we?
Sure.
And so I feel like in that moment I fell in love with the company by way of Mr. Kent Sargent. Wow. And I just really felt like this is it. This is the company. This is the job that I want. Even though prior to that moment, I didn't really care that much.
So I'm just curious. This is a side question. What happened to Mr. Sargent? Are you in touch with him?
We message every now and then through social media.
He's still around and doing... Is he at Crate and Barrel still?
No. Oh. Kent ended up... I guess leaving right around like 2011. And actually, I ended up taking over the role that he had. Oh, wow.
Well, Kent, shout out to you if you're listening to this conversation. So let's now switch gears into, I guess, I know a little bit about the story, but maybe the listeners want to hear. What was the sort of catalyst for you always wanted to be an entrepreneur, from what I know, or maybe at some point in your life you realized that you did. What were some of those decision-making things you were going through, and then what was the catalyst eventually that was the decision moment for you that this is it, you're done, and just 2 years ago you decided that I'm on my way to my entrepreneurship?
Both my parents had jobs, and they were with their companies for a long time. Mm-hmm. And I had entrepreneurs in my family background. My grandmother on my mom's side was a serial entrepreneur. One of my uncles, who's my godfather, is an entrepreneur. So there was entrepreneurship back there, but most of my role models in the way of family were employees. And I was raised to really, go to college, find a job. And I'm that generation where I'm probably the last of the generation where you could retire with the same company, the one company. Mm-hmm. Because if you're watching this in video, I might look younger. But I'm actually...
But she is. She is.
I'm actually Generation X. And so anyway, I joke. But I was supposed to just have the one job. And I was doing really well, actually. And I was well revered in my company and had a great track record, success. And... my job was very important because I was in the New York market, and so I was always successful in that sense, in that way. Now, when did I discover or come to the awareness that I wanted to be an entrepreneur? It wasn't immediate. Mm-hmm. Because like I said, my closest examples were my parents, who were employees. And probably that was part of the reason why it took me so long to leave. Mm-hmm. However, over the course of many years, I got, for example, my health coaching certificate from Institute for Integrative Nutrition, and I started coaching clients, on the side part-time. I had so many side hustles. What
was the reason for that? Why did you need side hustles?
Because I was clearly looking for other...
Not to make money.
No, it wasn't to make money.
Okay, well that's...
It was another way for me to
do multiple things.
Satisfy my desire to do something greater than what I was doing, to make a greater impact. Okay. So there was a health coaching piece. I was on the fitness journey, so I found myself teaching group fitness. I was teaching group fitness at Equinox. I was doing group fitness for the city of New York for, on volunteer purposes for example, people who couldn't afford to go to the gym. So I was doing that. And I was also dabbling with network marketing. In 2013, I got involved with a company called Team Beachbody, which, many people know was the creators of Insanity and P90X. So I did all that, to really satisfy I just always had this there's so many ways I can help people, and I want to help people. I had 28 credits in college all 4 years, and so for me, there was something about who I was that really identified with being busy and just having my hands in a lot of different things that satisfied me.
So where does that link then to... So, being a Team Beachbody coach, which I was too, it's partly entrepreneurial because you're trying to do it for service, right?
Sure.
So what is it then that was the catalyst? Okay, I'm done with this. I'm going to go beyond, the retail job that I have, which sustains me for the most part. Now I'm going to make a difference. to go do this stuff on my own. Isn't there a risk-taking appetite you need to really have? Really know who you are, and then what does the safety of the paycheck mean for you? And then now what are you going to do going forward if you don't have that paycheck?
Yeah, when I did finally quit my job, after thinking about it for about 8 to 10 years.
All right. Well, that's okay. That's all right.
It came during a major life change. It was truly like a blank slate moment, which, many of us, if we're lucky enough to see it as a blessing, we take these tragic moments, I guess, or maybe they're not tragic. Maybe they're just moments of like heartache and heartbreak, moments in lives when we are broken down. And I had one of those moments in 2018. I found myself burnt out finally I was burnt out from my job. So my health wasn't in great condition. My boyfriend and I, who I was with for 8 years, we broke up. I had a flood at my house. So on all fronts, it seemed like the world was closing in on me. And so sometimes it takes having your back against the wall for us to finally make a decision. And 2018 was that for me. The burnout that affected me physically began in the spring, summer. The flood happened in July, and it was major. I needed, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to renovate my place as a result. And then my boyfriend and I broke up in the fall. And it was only like a month later when I decided I have nothing left to lose. If I don't do this now, if not now, when? And on Thanksgiving Day 2018, I decided that on December 3rd, 2019, I would give my notice to my job that I'd been with for 20 years. And I didn't waver from that decision. And, once I had made a decision and I committed, little by little things started happening. And that was it. That was when it happened. And, if you're listening to this, part of the work Raju and I do is helping our clients make decisions before they get to that point. Helping people start to shift towards transformation before they get to a point where they feel like they have no options. I think I needed to go through what I needed to go through. But I think that as human beings, we can shift the consciousness to a space where we shouldn't have to create a situation for ourselves where we're out of options before we actually commit to something and make a decision. And so that's, if you want to know why and how I finally came to it, it's because I felt like I had lost everything that mattered to me anyway. So why not?
Nothing left to lose.
Why not?
Right. So you, in terms of catching it early, if you were able to do that, was there any moment in your life before that you had indication that you could have made that till everything was caving in on you?
Oh, well, in 2014, I had a stroke.
So I was getting to that.
So I was only 40. No one who's 40 has any business having a stroke, let alone healthy, at least outwardly, physically healthy. Yeah. And, the doctors never did figure out what was the cause for it. And then by the grace of God, fortunately, I walked out of the hospital 2 days later, miraculously, as if it never occurred, because everything that I had lost came back within hours. And
then you went back to your work in 6 days after that or something?
I didn't even take a leave of absence. I literally was back to work in 6 days.
Right. So that's another, kind of checkpoint to say, well, what were you thinking? if you had a stroke at the age of 40, what was it that then kept you going back and say, okay, I'm back to work and I can still win the world.
You know, I remember our CEO at the time. His name is Adrian Mitchell. He was an interim CEO that we had. And he actually, this is when I felt like the company still had heart. He called me up actually on my cell phone to tell me, take all the time that you need. Nothing that is happening here is more important than your health. And I thought, wow, what a stand-up guy. Yeah. And even our CEO prior to him, who had heard what happened, Sasha Bob, his name, called me up and was like, you're the healthiest person I know. How did this happen? Right. And if you're listening and you're a leader or you see level, these things matter.
Yeah, of
right?
course. Yeah.
And I remember Adrian saying to me, nothing is more important than your health. And honestly, Raju, to answer your question, I just wanted to prove that truly I didn't lose anything. Mm-hmm. Truly that whatever faculties I lost temporarily when I was having the stroke truly did come back. And, you know, prior to that point, I never saw myself as anything less than unstoppable. Mm-hmm. My identity was tied to being invincible. And I just wanted to hang on to that. And it was important for me to go right back to work, to see my teams, to visit my stores, to have everybody see me as completely intact. Because I needed to see myself intact. And in hindsight, you have a different...
So what is that?
Let's go hindsight,
what's the hindsight? What does it tell you now?
The hindsight is all about self-care and self-love. You know, if this were to have happened to somebody that somebody else that I loved, I would make sure they understood the importance of taking the time to rest. To rest, R-E-S-T. To allow yourself to be supported. To allow yourself to take the space to recover. To give yourself permission to be vulnerable and receive care from people. You know, I didn't even let my parents come here to
I know that
care
story.
for me, because I had this identity in my mind that I was their child that didn't need them. I was their child that was completely capable on all on her own. And so that was probably one of those moments that, you know, the universe can get very loud with the lessons we need to learn. And it'll come. These lessons will come when you're most susceptible. But I was clearly still hard of hearing. Hard of hearing, not able to receive. And it was another 4 years from that time. It was not until 2018 until I finally made these changes.
So for those listeners who are at the cusp of this, and then everything is hunky-dory, and then something really radical happens, you don't want to wait for that, right? That's what we've been talking about. Because what is it that they should be looking for as red flags, as potential, checkpoints to say, hey, you're overdoing this, and maybe it's your ego, maybe it's your type A personality, maybe it's something else that you really ought to be paying attention to, and not your ego, but something is telling you. Then when it happens, as we always talk about this in our coaching sessions, when things happen, they happen slowly, and then they happen like that.
Suddenly.
And then it's like, I don't believe this. How could it happen to me? I'm such a healthy person, and all of those things that we all know. And this person died at the age of 45, had a hole in the heart. I didn't know they were so fit, but they were ignoring certain things, right?
Yeah, I mean,
what is the way to
when we think about life, as much as we've been programmed, because this is how the traditional Western medicine looks at our body, looks at our body in parts. So you feel a disease or an ailment in one part of your body, you get treatment for that. And then that particular treatment negatively impacts other parts of your body. So then you have treatment for those parts of your body, right? And then now, instead of treating your body as a whole, now you find yourself with all these different types of Band-Aids for all the different things. And you're not really finding wellness. You're just finding more illness or more sickness. And this is why I have a love for integrative medicine or functional medicine, because they do see and recognize the importance of looking at the body as a whole. Well, the body is beyond just the physical. We also, actually, first and foremost, are spirit beings first. And when life seems to be throwing us a bunch of lemons, yes, we can make lemonade. If you're an optimistic person, you make lemonade with your lemons. However, at some point, you have to wake up to the messages that are there. If you keep running into blocks, obstacles, situations where it feels like you're getting nothing but negative feedback from the universe or people around you or situations, you have to ask yourself, what are you resisting? Or what are you pushing up against? Because when you're living in flow, and everybody knows what flow is that ease. It's effortless. It is, there's grace in flow. And grace speaking to, the blessings, what feels like luck. A lot of people will talk about it as luck. And when you don't have that, people talk about it, or, you could talk about it, instead of good luck, it's bad luck.
Yeah.
And you and I have had this conversation, the idea that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And we would like to argue that the teacher actually never left. The teacher is always there. It just depends on where the student is in terms of their readiness. Because the truth is, unless we're willing to see what is there, it can come to you in many different forms, but we'll still miss it. Yep. Right? And it's a matter of tuning in to another frequency. And this idea of leaving my job and leaving everything that I knew to be truth and allowing myself to tread in completely new territory, dark waters, right? Because you don't know. I don't know what to expect. I've only been an employee. And now in my 40s, I'm going to go into this journey of entrepreneurship as a coach, starting
with a stranger,
a new business.
With a guy you didn't know, right?
How do you go from that?
You don't know.
You have to tap into things unseen.
So I was going to ask you that as a sort of a final question then on this journey of entrepreneurship. Then what has it been like for you since you began your process 2 years ago or so? And then we began working together about a year and 15 months or 18 months ago.
In 2019, I hired many different coaches. I had a lot of different help. I knew I needed business coaches. I needed, I hired a tantric coach, and that really means like self-love, love. I hired a career coach. I invested so much money in myself. I even hired a chef, a personal chef. Really to arm myself with resources and tools so that I could focus on, building my business. But I knew I needed to take care of myself. And one of the things that I learned from, for example, the tantric coach was this idea of future journaling. And it's a lot of it, if you follow Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, he's got this amazing meditation, which I did it every single day that summer of 2019. It's called Tuning Into New Potentials. Mm-hmm. And in that particular meditation and in all the future journaling that I did, I just focused on the essence of what I was creating and how I was living. Nothing in my journals that I did daily had to be in chronological order. None of it had to make sense. But every day I got to write down a new journal entry from my future as I envision it, as if it had already happened. And what it does is it connects you to the emotions that at the end of the day we're really after. And we so wrongly set goals based on external markers, when at the end of the day we're really looking for that internal compass, that core desired feeling that we want to generate. And what the future journaling taught me to do was to get really clear on what are these emotions, what are these feelings. And when you're able to do that, the gold or the magic in that is that when you meet people or when circumstances present themselves to you and you feel the emotion, even if it doesn't show up exactly with the form you had imagined, because you feel the essence, that's how you know it's right. And so for me, that is the value of visualization. The value of visualization isn't to get clarity on the form. It's to get real connection to the essence, so that when those moments or people or situations show up and you feel it, you feel the essence, you know it's right, even if the form is not what you pictured. Just like you can discern the form might be just like what you pictured, but the essence energetically is wrong, then you know to say no.
So, advice for people listening, if there was such an easy thing, I know this is not so easy to do, but one thing would be to think about future journaling. What are the other 2 tips that you would give them to think about based on all the things we talked about in terms of how your life changed 20 years ago and, of course, 8 years ago, and now here you are?
Well, the first thing, okay, so you said first thing is future journaling. The second thing is shift your perspective. You just got finished saying it's not that easy. Why? Let's just change that. Actually, it's not that hard. It actually is pretty easy when you can just tune into what feels good. That's actually easy. It's just that we're not used to thinking about it that way. We're so used to being programmed to think that whatever is good should be hard, that we don't deserve it, so we have to work so hard for it, or that something that is good for us is so far away and we have to earn it. And I'm saying to you, actually come out of that thinking and get into the thinking of, yes, whatever it is that I'm imagining, on some quantum level, I must only be able to imagine it because I've already experienced it on some multidimensional level. Because otherwise,
you wouldn't be uncomfortable.
How would I even know about it? So, go from that's hard, that's not for me, to, you know what? Maybe thinking about it as it being hard is the block. Maybe I need to just get out of my own way and actually allow for the ease to come in. So that's one advice. It's the second advice. And the third would be pay attention. Set up practices moment to moment, day to day, that allow you to stay aware and conscious, so that you have a way of checking yourself and taking evidence. life can move so quickly, so fast. We can be so busy, caught in this striving that we don't ever take time to actually pause and recognize, what it is that's working, and to create more of that. And in the process of reflection, whether it's through journaling, through meditation, through just momentary pauses throughout the day, and capturing that, there's so much value in training our minds to recognize what is working for us versus being magnetic and attracted to what's not working, which is how the rest of the world would have us think of, anyway.
So that would be, one was journaling, one was the, what was the second one again?
It's about getting connected.
And the third, just to be clear, you really ought to be not just intentional, but be aware that's what you're saying, right? As to where you're feeling what you're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Is that fair?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So are there any last words of wisdom for people who are struggling with this journey of what they're at in their own day-to-day life, and let's say even whether it's corporate jobs or women who are, homemakers and just feel like they're trapped, or other situations that people are facing in transition? Is there anything that you want to share as you say goodbye?
We're never not in transition. Because if you ever are at a point in your life where you feel like you're done, sayonara. Because even if you are alive and breathing, you're basically dead. So we're never really ever done. And if you are someone seeking answers, seek the answers. Ask for help. You don't ever have to do this on your own, and you're not necessarily any less for wanting to seek support. Like I said, that first year, 2019, I had so much help. I surrounded myself with people who I knew I wanted to surround myself with, because they were going to be my support system, my new support system. And so much of transforming your life does involve dying to who you were. And, who we currently have in our lives today might not be who's best for us as we go through this transition. So, I'm not saying at all, like, say goodbye to all these people, because no, that's your family. What I'm saying is, in addition to the people that you know, it is your responsibility to yourself to set yourself up for success and to seek out the right support system that can help you as you go through that journey.
That's awesome. Thank you, Triccia. Thank you for being my partner. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your journey and your, all the insights that you've had over these past few years. And I'm sure the audience got a lot out of this. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.